Hello, hello. There he is. I think we're on time. So
Yes.
we'll kick it off. Welcome, mi gente. Hola. I hope you've been enjoying the Techqueria Summit thus far. Thank you for tuning into our panel, Community Made Paying It Forward with Tech, where we're going to be chatting about how to leverage tech to harness the power of community to solve obstacles and achieve success. And I'm joined by my amazing co-panelist, Ed, whom I'll kick it off to for some introductions.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So I'm very happy to be here, Techqueria. And so yeah, I'll talk a little bit about myself, then I'll kick it off to Jennifer for some introductions. So I have built my career on my biggest passion, which is language. So I've spent my life studying different languages and learning different languages. And I started my career first more on the creative side, more like doing translation work of scripts. Eventually, I ended up at Netflix through that work, where I was a language specialist doing content analysis. But I always had this passion for I like coding. And I have this talent, which is language, but I like coding. So eventually I moved to a more technical position within Netflix. And I really enjoyed that. And right now I'm taking some time for me before my next professional adventure, before I go back to the corporate world. And I'm very happy to be here, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Ed, for sharing and a little bit of your story. I'm Jennifer Gomez, she, her, ella, proud first generation Dominican American from Brooklyn, New York. And I'm also the co-founder and chief marketing officer of OneKin. We're a retail tech company that builds tools to help small businesses reach their audience and grow. And prior to being a tech entrepreneur, I spent over a decade in corporate America, driving global marketing solutions for brands like L'Oreal, NARS Cosmetics, Sephora, Major League Baseball, and Time Inc., to name a few. So that's a little bit about me. And before we get started on this amazing conversation that we're about to have, a little bit of housekeeping, call outs. So we'd love to address your questions and encourage you all. There's going to be some Q&A at the end. So Ed and I will be chatting around a few themes based on our panel today. But at the end, we'll reserve some time for Q&A. So drop in your questions to the right on the Q&A tab so we can easily find them and address them. And of course, feel free to, chat with us, engage with one another, especially if anything that we're saying resonates with you in the session chat tab, not the event tab. But that's a little bit housekeeping before we get started and make sure we're engaging you all as we move forward with our conversation. So, Ed, you and I have spent a lot of time getting to know each other these last few weeks, and it's been a tremendous pleasure. And so, I think we both feel very passionately that community is our superpower. So my question to you is, in what ways has community made you? And when did you realize that the important role that community has played in your career and in your personal life?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Yes, for me, it took me a while to really realize and accept the full power of community. I think I definitely went through a phase where I was like, oh, I'm going to follow the corporate America values, and I'm going to find my dream career, and I'm going to work at my dream company. And I think when I was going through that process, I neglected my community. And I think I felt the pressure to perform, to always this in individualism that is promoted a lot, in the US. And I did a lot of soul searching, and then I finally, in the past few years, really started reconnecting with my heritage, who I am, really taking me back to my beginnings in Mexico, having been born in Mexico, having spent some part of my childhood there, eventually coming here, struggling a bit at first, living undocumented, and then, being a DACA recipient. But I think once I tapped into my community, I'm like, whoa, this is where my strength is. And this is what allowed me finally to be in a place right now where I'm saying, I want to spend time on me. I want to spend time with my family because I haven't done that. I have been working very, very hard for many years and I haven't stopped. So I was working on Netflix and I'm like, I need some time off. I'm gonna take a few months off before I jump back. So, but once I discovered these values, I learned that I always had them in me. These values that I learned from my community. It's just like I was not at, did not feel confident enough. I felt I was going to be judged. For instance, I've let go of all of that. I've done all that growth, but part of those values is, for instance, compassion, like
Mm.
helping each other, and that's something I love to do. And sometimes in corporate America, you're kind of led to, you're divided in teams, you're in silos, don't cooperate with this other team. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not that's not one of my values. One of my values is compassion. I like helping people. I like feeling for people. And like thinking back when I was growing up, like when we had quinceañeras, when we had bautizos, like how do you make them? The community came together, everyone pitched in, and everyone had fun at this party, and this huge sense of community that I had I had put aside for a few years to go into corporate America. Um, Ultimately, I discovered that I wanted to follow my passion. So in order to do that, I had to pause and really connect with my community, which what I'm doing right now. My sister's here. My mom is about to come in a few days to come and visit me. And like, wow, like I really, really hadn't stopped to make this time to just speak Spanish and to watch the movies that I like in Spanish. So I think it's all these cultural values that were always in me. But because I was pursuing the American dream, I had to put them aside because I'm like, oh, I'm different. But yeah, I'm different. Yeah, and I'm proud of that now. Took me a long time to get there. And so I think one piece of advice I have for anyone, finding themselves and trying to make it in tech, you know, tap into your community, tap into your culture, and find that pride in your community, and that's what's going to take you far.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I love everything that you were saying. I'm like excited and I want to jump in. I think a couple of the points that you hit that also resonate with me are, that idea, the of individualism, right? Again, we talk about here in the U.S. we celebrate individualism, and which is counter to our Latina cultural values. We're a culture that invests in family. To your point, we invest in our community, whether it's sending money back home to wherever, whatever countries we originate from, our families originate from, or, bringing them over to the US, right? And I think as first gens, to your point, these two realities are sometimes in conflict for us, especially when it comes to our careers, right? But I found that in moments of transitions or moments, when I'm starting something new, whether it's transitioning in careers or even in life stages, right? I've found the most resources, the most courage, the most support when I've really leaned into community. And, one of the things, everybody says, and we're very accustomed to saying as a society is community, the universe conspires with, when you have your dreams, the universe always conspires for that. But I feel like in our communities, it's not just the universe who conspires, but community conspires too. And I see it, I was raised in a single family, single parent household with my mother, and I saw how the community chipped in to help kind of raise me and raise, just children in the neighborhood, being that it was a predominantly immigrant neighborhood in the US. I saw that in my professional career leading into, my predecessors or other Latina folks in corporate America who had been successful or achieved some sort of success along the way. I experienced it as, a tech entrepreneur, making that transition from deciding I'm done with corporate America and I'm going to pursue entrepreneurship. And I see it continuously in how like local communities really galvanize and show up in so many ways for the businesses that we serve through, my company, One Ken. So it's it's all the things you said and so much more. And I just love the reiteration of leaning into community and finding kind of pride and strength from that place.
Yeah, to echo one of the last points that you made, and I think this is where I find myself now, kind of like, oh wait, yeah, I could try to start a company, and like it's kind of like reassessing where you are in life, and but really like becoming aware of the skills that you do have and the talents
Absolutely.
that you do have, and it's like this is how I want to use them. Like in the end, it's capitalism is an exchange of money. But going for me, the mentality shift was from like, oh, the dream company, the dream career, as I was saying, to know like, no, these are my skills, and where do I want to spend? Use these skills and spend my time. So it's great. It's great that you were able to, take this direction and found this company. Cool. With that, let's jump to another question. So Jennifer, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So we're talking about tech and some of how it has affected us, how it has changed us. So how would you say that tech has helped you navigate around some of the major obstacles? You mentioned some of them. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I see tech really as this ultimate tool, for solving, economic, social inequalities and obstacles that our communities face. I always say this, there is no dearth of talent, in our communities, or grit or anything, really, that we need to be successful in this country, or in general, right? What we lack is access, resources, and really a pipeline, right, to opportunity. So I've always thought that the biggest, tech's biggest gift has been empowering our access to information that was maybe previously safeguarded, and access to each other, right? So for me, and I think many folks can relate to this on viewing us today. Like, I'm first gen Hispanic, high school graduate, first gen college graduate, first of many things, right? And tech has always allowed me to see what was possible, even if it wasn't immediately like, in front of me growing up, right? It helped me, research different ways to get to those places, and then find tools and that I can apply to solve problems. So I feel, the best example for me really is entrepreneurship. It is a baptism like through fire, and there's no blueprint on how it gets done, and finding folks who originate from the same places that you do, both culturally, socially. It's difficult, right, in tech as well. And so, for me, I guess the biggest thing that tech influences everything that I do, aside from running a tech company, but also, things like, we're developing a new live shopping app. That's one of our latest products that's launching later this year. There are obstacles that come up, and we have to be able to empower and teach ourselves different functionalities and wear different hats. For me, that was, teaching myself how to be a UX UI designer, and for mobile, and that, my background is marketing. I'm a creative. I've done tons of designing growing up, but never had to architect or design for a mobile app before, right? And that being able to kind of dig your hands in, figure it out, learn, teach yourself, it is something that I find that's so like beautiful about tech. The fact that it democratizes our entry points into different ecosystem, different opportunities that weren't previously available to us, and then really just being able to connect and find like peers and mentors. So those are ways that really tech has not just fueled my aspirations, but my career and also my personal life. And I know you have some great stories too. So can you share ways that tech has empowered kind of some of your choices and help you solve some of the obstacles throughout your life as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, to our listeners, people watching out, feel free to drop questions, say hello, anything. We'll take anything. So yes, Jennifer, so I can relate to a lot of points you were mentioning. Once again, I think the point about getting your hands dirty and like you don't know this, but you'll come out of this knowing something new and just like giving it a try. And I think for me it has been about discovering my ability to learn, and which can sometimes be scary, to do a new thing. But it's like we've learned a lot of things before, we can learn new things. So it's like that trust in us. And I've had to do that a lot of that in tech. For me, what made a difference was really participating in ERGs. So I'm grateful that in my time at Netflix, I was very active in the ERGs. And Netflix does do a good job at promoting these different communities and providing with resources, and money so that the ERGs can do great things. So as soon as I joined Netflix, I became active in the Pride ERG, which is the queer LGBTQ plus employee resource group, and I really liked it. I found out that I really like organizing events. So it's like, oh, I'm going to create these events, and other people are going to have fun. Great. Great. So, and then eventually I became active in the leadership, which really taught me a lot about leading and leading a group of volunteers. Everyone's in the ERGs because they want to be. It's not part of their job. So everyone who's there, they want to be there in that group. So I think what really helped me come out of my shell was meeting other people who were courageous to share their stories, to share their struggles. And I'm like, whoa, here are these people who are like-minded folks who try to achieve a lot. And that's how we ended up, in the same company. And so for me, that was very important, kind of like coming back. Okay, this is what brought me here. This is what brought me to, find this job, to get this type of pay. But now, like, oh, wait, this is telling me that I'm going to come back now to my roots and what makes me me. So I was fortunate to find other people who helped me do that digging, and just learning that yes, we have these struggles, but we are not our struggles, and we can accept them and find strength in that. And for me, that was the ERG. So I think I really applaud companies who are putting in effort and genuine effort and to get these communities together and get our input. A lot of times the executives don't have really the insight as to what's important and what concerns these communities, and just having these groups and creating. I mean, not only creating the time, but also funding.
Right.
Funding is important for these groups. So for me, it was connecting with the queer community, the Latinx community, and just getting to know people and like, wow, you are just like me. And sometimes the struggle is a different struggle. Somebody had a different struggle growing up that really, really shaped their life and who they are. But I'm like, well, I just feel like you and I connect, even though. So I really connected someone in the Pride group, for instance, somebody who came from the Deep South, somebody who was, had a hard time with their identity. And I'm like, well, I experienced the same thing. Like, we come from very different backgrounds, but we experience the same struggle for identity. So I think finding that community of other folks, and I think this, Techqueria, this is what we're doing. We're getting, folks from the tech industry who want to, get into these companies but stay true to yourself. I know that sounds cliche and everything, but that's what worked for me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And I just to add to your point, Ed, I mean, I think again, speaking to the two dualities, right? Like we shy away so much in trying to kind of live up to this blueprint of what we think success is, right? Or what, what we should be doing. What is that? What does that road look like? And that community piece, but also that having pride where you come from and seeing that from a place of value, not just value in terms of your family and your personal life, but value that it brings to the companies you work for, value that it brings to the services you're providing, value that it brings to just like being, being seen or being heard, is tremendous. And I think because we feel like we have to kind of separate the two, right? Our generation, it's great to kind of see these conversations happening because we're starting to connect the dots, right? See the value and bring it in together, fuse it into our careers and our aspirations and tech, right? The products that we're putting out there and what we're developing and building. So I think that's a natural kind of, transition into something that I think even in the chat, folks are asking about and want to know, right? We've sat down a few times and we've exchanged kind of battle stories, right, on how we've gotten here and what we've done and, the road here. And as, we talked about this before, we want to be able to share some tangible takeaways, right? So how do you define success? Let's share some tips on how like we've found it, or how do you define it, excuse me. And then let's share some tips on how we've been able to find, some of it, how someone else can find it. How can you transition into tech? And then how do we pay it forward, right? How do we keep passing the baton and sharing resources? I love to see folks kind of sharing and connecting on the chat, and paying it forward and offering their services and their insights. It's great. Like, love to see it, need more of it. But Ed, can you kind of guide us into that conversation?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, going off also, I'm going to incorporate one of the questions in the chat about, transferring skill sets to tech. And I think I definitely experienced this because, I started my career with language. So working more for the entertainment industry, but in Hollywood. So very, different industry. And I think for me, what it was is whatever skills you have. I think for me, what was important, putting in the business component, and I believe that that's what you see in tech. It's like you can be a UX designer, software engineer, an artist, a translator, and on top of that, the additional component is just the business knowledge of how you navigate the corporate America, and a lot of that is, Jennifer, what you were saying is that finding a mentor who you can feel comfortable asking questions and somebody where you don't feel that you're going to be judged. And I think for me that was important. Ultimately, success for me is having gone through everything I've gone through in life, including working in tech, and then looking back to my community and then thinking, what are some of the things I wish I had known? And I think that has led me now to want to mentor others, especially young folks, young folks coming out of school, and things that I never heard. But one is like, yeah, there is actually a business, etiquette, and you have to learn how to communicate with your peers, and then how to give feedback to your manager, upwards, and maybe your director, your VP, and all of that is intimidating. And growing up, I never heard any of that, and no one taught me to go in there and find it. So for me, then the key to success in tech is learning this business language, business etiquette. And so the best advice I can give is find someone who has find that answer, and if they can become your mentor. And that is something that I'm doing with different people. For me, it's finding my path in life, and then how can I help others achieve it? So that ties back to compassion, to altruism, which I learned from my community. Ultimately, ultimately what led me to feel happy with myself and find that success is, yeah, connecting with my Mexican heritage. And so I went from a mainstream culture that told me this is not correct. There is another different way of living that is correct, and that's the mainstream culture. But ultimately, I came back. And so for me, that's success. Like knowing your worth, Like, these are my skills, and I want to work for this company. Yes, the company can treat you really well, but in the end, it's you're working a job, and ultimately, who you are and the people who the people from your life, they're going to stay with you whether you work at that company or not. And so to me is the way I pay it forward in tech is now I know how corporate America works. There are other people in my situation, like when I was growing up, who didn't have access to information, who didn't have access to resources, to networking in different companies. How can I help now my community, my Mexican community, with mentoring, with information, with answering questions? I do a lot of this on social media. On my Instagram, I share tips. I offer to answer questions from people who are interviewing. And I think if I could summarize the advice I give to people is, yeah, be yourself. Accept yourself just as you are, with your flaws, with your limited knowledge, and be open to learning. Know that you're going to learn a lot. But if you ever feel ashamed or like insecure about your identity, come back to that. Come back to your community. And then bringing yourself to work. At the end, yeah, there are going to be other people very different than you at work. Keep that pride in your community. So, Jennifer, I would ask you the same question. How do you define success, and what tips you have for us to find success and then paying it forward using tech?
Yeah, I always cringe at the word success, and like, I don't know why. I think it's just the pressure that we put so much on ourselves, like, Americans, especially as I feel, first gens, right? To like do the right thing, to be by the book, to follow what we think, what has been told to us is the right path to success, right? So for me, this kind of obsession with perfection, right? Because, we don't want to make our families look bad. Like, how much they sacrifice so much to get here, right? Like, how much, for the opportunities that we have. And so that like need for perfection is sometimes crippling to success, right? Because success is messy. It's not linear. It's, just a bunch of dots, and you trying to kind of connect them, and you may not know why you're standing in one of them at this point, but looking back, it makes sense, in the future. So for me, success has evolved, especially since the birth of my daughters. I thought that kind of climbing the corporate ladder would equate to success for me. And I did that, and ultimately I came to realize, later in my career, that success for me is now where, when my values align with my work, and when that work positively impacts the communities that I care about, and, and expand kind of the realm of what's possible for my daughters and, generations to come, right? Little Latinx and Black and brown girls that look just like them, right? And dream just like them. So, the way I pay it forward to tech, or the way one could pay it forward to tech, is kind of, I would say I would start, right? The starting point anytime is constantly asking, what brings you purpose and joy? What is that, or what is the most audacious dream that you can have? And if you don't know, then what is the outcome of that dream? Is it peace? Is it generational wealth? Is it buying a house for your family? Is it bringing, excuse me, bringing family here? What is the outcome of that dream? And what are the blockers that are preventing you from attaining it? from achieving it. So that's always step number one. And that was something that I constantly asked myself throughout different points in my career and in my personal life. And that is kind of my true north, like my compass for how I define and how I go towards success. I would say to folks who are starting off in tech, who want to transition into tech, who are also just kind of wanting to find, leverage the power of tech to harness, to find their path, is don't wait for anyone to do the work for you. It's kind of like what you said, Ed, like show up to work, tap into, there's so much information out there. Tap into those free resources. Google has a bunch. General Assembly has tons of information out there. YouTube University is real. That's what I call it. But, there's so much out there for us, tech. There's this kind of myth that you need to have all these credentials, that you need to have X background to get started in tech. Some of the, most talented engineers I know are self-taught. And tech really touches a wide range of ecosystems, right? You can be a creative touching tech, you can be, editor touching tech. You can be an engineer touching tech. You can be a project manager touching tech. What are you good at? Where is your wheelhouse? What is your talent? Harness that and find ways. There's multiple touch points into going into tech. And if it's not, then listen, make that leap of faith and figure it out, learn it, tap into those free resources. I mean, there's, just to name off a few, if you have a great idea and you want to launch an app, you don't need to be a coder to launch your first MVP, right? The first version of it. There are no coding apps out there like Bubble or Glide. There's so many, interactive design tools there. So if if social content is your thing, there's Canva for that. If you want to, design, I'm going back to websites or apps, there's Cabana, there's Figma, there's so many products out there. If you want to start a side hustle, because that's how so many of us start, right? And you create soaps, or you create art, or you create jewelry, or whatever you can do. There are e-commerce shops out there that are already templated. We don't have to start from scratch. There's Shopify and BigCommerce. The biggest thing I would say, if I would kind of look back and talk to myself a few years ago, is don't reinvent the wheel for everything. Don't reinvent the wheel in the beginning. You really just need a proof of concept, right? To put things out in the market. So don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, to be messy at the beginning. It's not going to look pretty, but this is how we start. And it's meant to be that way. It's called, optimization, right? Like everyone's first product out there, anything that you throw out there is going to be ugly. It's not, it's not going to be perfect. And that's okay. It's intentionally that way. And you perfect your craft. You continue to optimize it. And you could, as long as you are connecting the dots for people and providing a service and catering your product to authentically, service your audience and a customer, then I think that's, that you're on a track to success. The other thing I would emphasize, Ed, which is what you said, is online communities, not just for mentorship, but for advice, for peers in your space, for support. Start with your immediate circles, but then there's Techqueria, there's, I'm part of a few, right? La Nueva Link, Amplify Latinx Connect, We All Grow Latinas in Tech. I can go on. This is beautiful. There are all these opportunities for us. And I would just say, just like you guys are doing right now in the chat, like show up for others in your community, right? Collaborate, shop Latinx businesses, invest in Latinx businesses. Right now, investing was something that seems so far-fetched for, everyday folk. But there are now crowdfunding platforms that really made it possible for anyone to invest even $100, $50. I love to use Leo Libros. as an example. I bought them before, they when they first launched, and I have Cantinflas and I have Frida, and I bought all these little children's books for my daughters because I wanted them to have that cultural pride and learn about these icons and figures. And they kicked off a crowdfunding campaign and had thousands of investors. Really, it was the community just showing up and rallying behind them and helping them raise a few $1 million. It was beautiful to see. So continue to be a champion for everything, Latinx, and share your learnings. Just like our tias, who used to kind of give advice and share, resources over some cafecito. Like, that is I think the biggest takeaway from this conference, from this conversation, is that juntos llegamos más lejos, and continue to be a pillar and a champion and a source of knowledge and resource abundantly for each other. So, that's kind of a big takeaway for me, for everyone who's at home listening.
Yeah, you're taking me back to my childhood. You're making me think of my tias now.
But it's true, that's yes. Kind of how that was how communication, that's how we shared things back in the day, or still, like it's how the hookup, that's how it happened. And we have to tap into that and not forget to like hook each other up, right?
Yeah, and I think one point that you made that I want to echo is perfectionism. I think I struggled, and I've struggled with that. And again, coming from we have this dream job and everything, and we want to do everything perfect. But something that I learned is no, things don't have to be perfect. Things don't have to be perfect. And I think that perfectionism can keep us from acting, from doing things. It's no, I'm not going to do it until it's perfect. Well, then it's never going to get done. So I think, if you have an idea, just going for it. And no, it doesn't have to be perfect. And as far as you touched on education as well, and I think it's very important, accepting that you're capable of learning, but accepting also what you don't know. And these days, there's so many resources out there. And I know from my time in tech and going interviewing candidates, a lot of times it's not the degrees that you have. It's no, you can self-teach, you can learn on your own, and it's what do you do with that? And that is what's more important a lot of times to companies, not the degrees you have, but what have you, what practical solution have you found? And so +1 on all of that, Jennifer.
Awesome.
So we have a question in the Q&A. So I'll read it, and then we can take a stab at answering it. So what's a good way to research company culture? Somebody telling us, I'm trying to transition into tech and have had a few interviews. I felt like my interviews didn't match what I read on the company website. Jennifer, do you have any insights? You want to start?
Yeah, Marisela, I mean, that's hard, right? And I think what you probably are alluding to and have experienced, just like many of us, is that performance, right? It's cool to, company culture has now become kind of a more mainstream conversation, especially in the wake of last year, right? And we see a lot of performance, and sometimes it's hard to distinguish between which companies are authentically being that way versus what they're advertising. I would say, and this of course feels, again, pushing aside the imposter syndrome, pushing aside any vergüenza or pena that we may feel, we have to get over kind of, that hurdle of asking for help, or even cold emailing, cold contacting, etc. But I think what would be helpful is definitely hearing advice or hearing kind of insights from someone who works there. Someone who may not be kind of attached to the position or the management position or a department that you are interviewing for. But, maybe there's someone in LinkedIn that once you can search that website and find, maybe it's a first connection, maybe it's a second connection, maybe it's not a connection at all and it's a cold email, but reach out to someone. It's okay to be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm really excited. I'm interviewing at your company. I would love to hear from you. I see you have, maybe there's some parallels there if it's somewhat related to what you're doing or what you're interviewing for. I would love to hear more about what you are, the corporate culture is like. Tell me more about any affinity groups you guys may have, or any of initiatives that the company may have, or is it toxic? And maybe not say that all up front, but just like ask, and then maybe that kicks off a conversation where you can be a little bit more authentic and forthcoming about your concerns or about their experience. But I also think it's okay to ask at the interview. It's totally okay. It's something that's extremely relevant right now. You express your interest and your excitement for the role, and then also just say, company culture is extremely important for me. How are some ways in which you're creating kind of an inclusive or an engaging, company culture. But best of luck to you. I think those are two great things. And in your transition, I think there are many people who have done that transition, so you're not alone. And there are many people who you can reach out to and talk to about that.
Yeah, and to build on that, I think my advice would be, ask an interview. I think remember that you're also interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you. This is your potential new employer, and you want to make sure that you want to work there. So also make sure that you're interviewing the company and actually go ahead and ask the tough questions, and bring up the company culture. If you have concerns of like how things are actually done in practice versus the company culture. So I think definitely go ahead and ask those tough questions. I think it's going to show that you're looking at things critically, and you're not just saying yes to make people happy. No, you're actually analyzing things. And I think go ahead and make time. When at Netflix, I would often put call to be in interviews. Candidates who requested to talk to someone from the ERG, from the Pride, the queer group. So I gave my perspective. What is it like as a queer person to work at this company? And you can request interviewers. For instance, you can request a Latina interviewer if you have questions about what is it like to be a Latina in this company. So go ahead and don't be afraid to ask the tough questions.
I would also just one more thing to add to that, Marisela, is we talk a lot about self-worth, right? And we kind of put these companies at a pedestal because they kind of paint a picture of where we should be or what success is. But remember that you are bringing tremendous value to this company too, exactly to Ed's point. So if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't sound right, don't be afraid to walk away, right? Don't be afraid to, we have sometimes, all of us, right, this scarcity mindset. There are other jobs out there. There are other places. And if not, go create it. You know what I mean? Like they're like, don't have a disempowered perspective or view in going into any type of interview. You come from that power of empowerment, and it shows, it's something that they'll recognize and value too. So good luck to you, Marisela. She said, tech is amazing. I'm on it. Yes.
Yes. But plus one on that, like bring it back to you, to yourself. And you are bringing skills to the company. And so, find that self-confidence. So we have 2 minutes, Jennifer. Any other points, questions? Feel free to connect, by the way, on social media, LinkedIn. Happy to answer questions even after the summit.
Yes, that's a great point. I was just going to ask you to say if folks wanted to get in touch with any of us, we're open. We've dropped our socials on our profiles, websites. So please do reach out, not just with us, but anyone that you've networked with or anyone that you're talking, you've encountered in the summit thus far. But I think our time is wrapping up, and I want to thank everyone who's watching for chatting with us. Techqueria for having us both here, and you, Ed, always for being so real and authentic, and kind of bringing your vulnerable self into the conversation as well.
Likewise, Jennifer. It's been amazing participating in this with you. I couldn't have asked for a better partner to answer these questions. And thank you, everyone who asked questions and who showed up. And yeah, happy to answer any other questions after the summit. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Good luck, everyone. Thank you for chatting.
Good luck. Bye-bye.